masculinity is a state of mind prepared to defend patriarchal moral values, and this means that masculinity is a state of mind prepared to defend a principle. What principles would that be? It would be the principles of your moral system, whatever it is. And what do I mean by a moral system? I mean by that, of course, a system of rules, of do's and don'ts that are used by your society, whatever it is. This is of universal application. So communist countries would have laws supporting communism, and capitalist countries would have laws supporting capitalism. It's only Islam that says, well, if you want to choose a moral system, then you'll have to make it the law of the land. Otherwise, there's no point. So Islam is really the first moral system that says your laws have got to do what it says on the tin. This is unheard of to Christians who don't know what the hell it is that the New Testament says anyway. And as for the Old Testament, well, even Jews don't follow it, not really. They know they're not supposed to read the Torah without the Talmud. So after 2,000 years of distortion and prevarication and interpreting in things that were never there and interpreting out things that you don't want to be in, you get to a confusion of nobody really knowing whether something is allowed or not, or allowed with so many conditions that it might as well not be allowed, or vice versa. So what we want are laws that are clear and easy to follow and easy to remember and easy to explain to others. That's all we want. And Islam has it. It's very clear. It's a draftsman's... No, it wouldn't be a draftsman's delight. I was going to say that it is. It has divine draftsmanship. It must have for all the... Yeah, just because it's such a model of legal draftsmanship. It says what it means clearly. It anticipates situations in which the rule might be expected to be suspended. It always gives exceptions to rules, or it does when required. So it would be a good thing if more lawyers studied it as a model of legal clarity and showing the foresight necessary for lawyers when they draft contracts, anticipating situations in which a term of the contract would be breached. But what is masculinity? Masculinity is, well, what I just said. It's not just having a six-pack, or let's just assume that men look the way men are supposed to do and have more strength than women and look in them and make themselves as attractive as possible to women within the bounds of masculinity and decency. Why is this important? Because certain things in society need to be done. And if men don't do it, then it just won't be done. And then women won't know their place. And things will start turning to shit. And you know when things are turning to shit, when people don't know who the hell they're supposed to be or what they're supposed to do. One follows from the other. And obviously, when this problem of knowing who the hell you are or what you're meant to do is affecting more than mere individuals, and it's actually affecting significant portions of society, then you know your society's in trouble. Your society, your nation, your empire, your civilization, and this is the problem of not having a functioning moral system. I understand that this idea is too abstract for so many people. A moral system? What on earth is that? They're all abstractions. When around you can see all the people you hate, people of the wrong colour, people of the wrong religion. Who wants to deal with abstractions? Not the urban proletariat, happy to blame Jews and Muslims for everything and incapable of understanding that if they're always complaining about liberal Jews, then the problem is probably not Jews but liberalism, because if you hate liberalism, then the liberal Gentile is should be as detestable as the liberal Jew. But obviously, being anti-Semites, they would find liberal Jews more detestable than liberal Gentiles or liberal females of childbearing age and possibly attractive. So these people who decide to hate certain groups and cannot think in abstractions are, well, I guess are not thinkers or political strategists or philosophers, but I think they can easily understand what it is I'm trying to do or say. Or do they? But the problem is, gender specific, I suppose. So if men know how to behave like men, then women will behave like women, and vice versa. So who's going to take the lead? Well, obviously, these ideas have to come from someone, and someone has to think the thought, say the thing, do whatever's required, and do it clearly enough for people to understand. And when they realise that people are more likely to pretend not to understand, then you have to think of a more effective way of getting their attention, particularly with the algorithms, with YouTube playing all sorts of little tricks to suppress our viewership and use algorithms to give us strikes or whatever. So in a way, masculinity is a simple thing. We used to think, oh, when a man's a man and he can do what a man's supposed to do, stand up for principle, defend something, starts by first defending a principle. If you can't defend a principle, then you won't defend the bigger things like your country or your property or anything that is yours. But old men don't defend much, do they? They can't be expected to, particularly old men who are childless or old men who are not assured of the cooperation of their families or womenfolk. They'll be too frightened to do anything much. And this cowardice is pervasive, it's contaminating, it's infecting. All that gets emphasised are scare stories. So-and-so lost his job. Well organised. But then these men cannot organise as much as a piss-up in a brewery, because they are leaderless men, and leaderless men are nothing more than women with penis extensions, behaving like women, bitching like women, herded like cows. What got them so stupid and weak? People talk of a lack of moral fibre. What does moral fibre mean? I think it means lack of having moral principles to defend. And how would you know which moral principle to defend if you haven't got a religion? And you have such a bad education, you don't know what's true or not true, and your verbal reasoning skills are so poor you can't tell if something's logical or illogical, sound or unsound, and you're so lazy and brain dead you don't even care. It's so much better to be in touch with your emotions of hatred and fear, and that is self-reinforcing emotions of hatred and fear. If you can't feel love and the higher emotions, then you'll have to make do with the low ones of hatred and fear. And that's what not having a religion does to you. You have no places to go. Community centres are really for religious people who look at the world through the same kind of lens. But if you haven't got a common narrative of where you're supposed to come from, then you wouldn't know, would you, where you're supposed to come from and who your friends and enemies are, or what even your own history is. People talk about the divisiveness of gender and race and class, but really the most divisive one of all is the one between the generations, where there is apparently mutual incomprehension and mutual hatred, and both parties really not caring to argue with each other anymore. And I've heard of this thing called the intergeneration gap, when it seems things change so quickly that there is a noticeable difference between the eldest child and the youngest child in what's being taught at school or social conditions. So what is masculinity but the preparedness to defend patriarchal moral principles, chief of which is the one about marriage, because it's impossible to have a patriarchy if you don't practice marriage, and unfortunately men are no longer able to discuss what it takes to make your society a patriarchy rather than let it rot and degenerate as a matriarchy where no one is in charge. So that is really the problem, and of course the major problem is the inability to even acknowledge that your society is a matriarchy, and of course denial is a feminine vice. What is being denied, you're going to ask? What is being denied is that Christianity is kaput, conservatism is kaput, and and Islam has been waiting in the wings. And I know this is the sort of idea that you want to put on the shelf and let it gather dust. But then that means so is the masculinity that is so required is gathering dust. Hesitancy is feminine, ambiguity is feminine, denial is a feminine vice, and there are 5 stages of it. It begins by denial, and then anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance. If people were more grown up, these processes would be undergone more quickly, undergone and completed until, well, the period between conception and articulation and implementation it's as short as possible, so problems get solved sooner rather than later. Hello, Nacho Big Mouth. Well, masculinity, I think, is maintained by having a stake in society, and you can only really have a stake in society if you've got a woman. Because then with a woman you can have children, and then you have more to protect. But if you're just on your own with your masturbation toy, then you really haven't got much of a stake. Yes, the fact that men are not masculine makes them women hate them. And that's why they keep voting for pro-immigration parties to have you men replaced. You feel they are scripting society. I don't think it's a good idea to blame particular individuals. Yes, I know there will be people who are actively cheering all this on. But I think the more accurate diagnosis is that Western civilization is dying of bystander apathy. There are no groups really plotting the destruction of Western civilization. I think it's just people thinking they can get away with it. They think, well, if we do this, nobody will stop us because they're stupid or they're weak or, we'll just lie to them. And that's because there is no overarching idea. But there is an overarching idea. It's just that nobody wants to talk about it because they don't like it. And I think they can get away with not talking about it because there's still time. Something like that. Because I don't think it's helpful to blame the people we dislike for everything. It's like, well, it's not a good idea because you're not allowed to complain about them. That's already the case. You're not allowed to complain about these people that you might blame for everything. And so if you even begin to go there, you're going to be called all sorts of names. So that's why I think you should couch your discourse in terms of explaining historical, economic, political, sociological forces. I think that is tactically sound, don't you? But if you want to, start blaming Jews or, whoever, you're going to get into trouble with hate speech. And there's no need to do that because they're not really to blame either. People follow the money. If you're an economic migrant, you're going to follow the money. And if you're a particular religious group, then you'll be wanting to benefit your particular religious group. There's nothing new about it. What is sinister and scary is the helplessness of Western man. That's the most frightening thing of all. And obviously it's because he's been feminized. How has he been feminized? He's been breastfed the idea of free love from, at increasingly young ages. And it has always been the case that the sexually sated male is politically inert. And so I think we were both agreed, my only person posting in the chat, that these abstractions that I keep harping on about, these principles which come from a moral system, and moral systems can include secular political ideologies as well as religions. And we have noticed, have we not, that all the world religions have golden thread running through them, which is that of social conservatism, of sanctifying the practice of marriage. Maybe that's the only thing that keeps them a world religion, and Christianity's the weakest link. It's the weakest link because it was long ago replaced by liberalism, and liberalism has become something evil and sinister. It has become intersectional feminism, and nobody has noticed or will dare say. And why? How has it come to this? It's come to this because, well, you have no scripture. Judaism has scripture. Islam has scripture. The New Testament, well, it's made up crap, isn't it? The Christians didn't even think to say that the Christian narrative comes from God. The Jews at least knew to say, even if you think it's all lies, the Torah comes from God, who gave it to Moses on Mount Sinai, witnessed by all those Jews at the base of the mountain. That's their story. And as for the Muslims, they say, well, God revealed the Quran through Muhammad, his prophet, and his words were transcribed. His words were recited, and then they were transcribed, and now it's our Quran, and we follow it, and nobody can change its words. What have liberals got? Or conservatives? They have nothing that is written down that any of their intellectuals can agree on. Well, as for nationalists, they don't even have a concept of a book other than my Kampf, which is, well, verboten. So when you think about it, scripture is key, because scripture is official handbook. An official handbook is, well, official. And people don't allow it to be replaced, or if they're going to update it, they'll say it's the second edition, the first edition, the third edition, or whatever. It will be a formalized process if they want to update it. Not what? Where are the principles of liberalism and conservatism? Has it ever been defined or articulated? No, it hasn't. And this is a kind of conceptual idolatry. Because really, the whole idea about forbidding idolatry is to exclude the other religions. And so, there are only two religions acceptable to God. And it would be the religions associated with the Torah and the Quran, because nobody would dare to tamper with their wording or redact its verses without there being a huge outcry. And there's the secret. Otherwise, liberalism and conservatism is a cushion that bears the imprint of the last pair of buttocks that sat on it. And that's why you can't carry on like this anymore. If you want to, well, carry on. And this is, I think, a universally, globally relevant message. That it would do us all well to consider and, well, submit to the necessity of having a rule book that we can all agree on. And I know how unpopular the Quran is, but the fact that so many people hate it is actually useful. Because it's not the word of a mortal, fallible person and his associates and supporters. And if we lived in a world where people were nurtured into being more humble and reasonable and truth-telling and truth-seeking, then the problem would have already been solved. Nacho Big Mouth, a man after my own heart. He doesn't believe in the oligarchy. No, it's unnecessarily divisive. And when you think about how it's run, I mean, yes, you can try to do away with your class system, but the thing is, you still need people to do different things, right? And in the end, you're still left with the working class and the commercial classes. Because you can't have one without the other. You know, whatever business idea you have, you need people to implement it. So people will be divided according to what they're capable of, as men and women, old and young, and rich and poor, and middle class and working class. So obviously we need these different components in our society to make it work, to make our nation work, because we need the division of labour to get things done. We need different forms of social, well, more efficient forms of social and political and economic organisation, you know, so that crops are grown and harvested and transported to the city and distributed in the city, you know, all this sort of thing. And it needs labour, it needs people, and it needs organisation, and we just want the best people to be in charge, so as few things go wrong as possible. And if we have problems, we want them to be solved as soon as possible. And I'm proposing to you a system that would be efficient and transparent, and which has worked before. If only people would consider the moral imperative of looking at the universe in hierarchical terms. So egalitarianism has proven to be a mistake. Equality is not justice. Aristotle was the one who said that it is the greatest injustice to treat unequal things equally. So gender justice is what we want. We don't want gender equality, because gender equality leads to gender confusion, leading to gender dysphoria, leading to transgenderism. Now, I think in theory there are all the things that are there before us to do all the things that we need to be done. It's just a matter of getting the message composed and propagated. And this needs focus, and this needs leadership, and it's time people acknowledge the essentials of political leadership. But nobody seems capable of talking about these ideas. But once we talk about leadership, you'll be talking about a leader, and you'll be asking, well, who? Surely not you, Claire. Who else? This is not a power grab, of course it's not. I don't have an army. I don't think I even have supportive enough people who even understand my ideas, even though they've known me for years. I think all I get are deadbeats and losers and larpers and perhaps some well-meaning people who can't really help because they've got no connections. And the clever, wealthy people don't want to talk about these things or think they can get away with not talking about these things. And I think it's necessary that we tell them otherwise. So, what's my roadmap to power? What I need to establish, not necessarily for me, but the credentials of anyone who thinks they can sort the mess out is to, keep talking to people. If they'll talk to me. Yes, it'd be nice to have a slot on the BBC. I was once offered a job on the BBC, but if I had got that job, I would have had to, renounce all my views. And that was actually the condition. I wouldn't have been able to do it anyway. They actually hated these BBC journalists by the left. So if you talk about the left, they also hate the BBC. I knew a leftist journalist, friend of mine, and she got a job at the BBC, and problem at Labour Party conferences. They really don't like the BBC. The fact is, everyone is doing their own thing and looking after their own patch. I don't think there's a directing force at all. I really don't. And I think for that reason it's even more frightening. So the parasites are just parasitizing, and then eventually they'll overwhelm the host, and then they'll have to feed off each other, and then it'll get even uglier. And here I have with my new idea that all these nationalists refuse to talk about, even though they have nothing better. I mean, that is the thing. That's the most exasperating thing of all. And I think I'm really the one with the best connections. I am a kind of Clapham Junction of nationalism. I know everybody. I know Jews. I know people who hate Jews. I know Muslims. I know people who hate Muslims. I think I'm reasonably well informed of who is or isn't in the political establishment and who is in and out of favour. But I only have 2 concurrent viewers. And it's actually pretty terrible. I think maybe YouTube are deliberately suppressing my viewership. It doesn't matter. I know it doesn't matter. A lot of people might feel a little self-conscious looking at 0 concurrent viewers, as Dr. Mengele would laugh and mock me for. But all these people who come and mock, do they have any ideas themselves? No, they don't. I'm not really looking for a slot anywhere. I mean, it would be nice. I don't want to go very far. But really, it is about the message rather than what platform I'm on. Yes, bad times. Domingo, you don't have any big ideas other than to double down on your hatred of a certain group. And I think this is really the problem of atheists, this psychologizing of their anxieties and their hatreds. I know that cogito ergo sum, that's something that's going round again. It's becoming popular because the whole idea of Descartes' cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, is the emotional response to one's contemplation of one's self. So when you think about yourself, you feel sure that you exist as you look at your fingernails and your reflection, and you think about your past, and then you feel sure that you do exist, and that's the only thing you can be certain of. And why did Descartes talk about that? He was actually trying to construct a chain of reasoning whereby you would believe in God through reason alone. That was what Descartes was trying to do. And he failed. But I have a better way, which is to say that the concept of God exists. Atheists and theists both agree that the concept of God exists, which is why they argue about whether God really exists or is just a concept. But it is enough that the concept of God exists because it's useful. So we can either choose to use this concept as the supreme authority and the source of our laws, or the source of support for our laws, or we can ignore this actually free resource because we're too proud. We think we're too smart to believe in God or pretend to believe in God. We think we'll find some person like kind of modern day Hitler who write the equivalent of Mein Kampf, and it's like there's just no time for this really. And why waste time? Why waste time reinventing the wheel when the solution is already here? Well, the problem we now know, well, I've diagnosed it. So the failure of Christianity meant its replacement by liberalism, and because liberalism is just is liberalism even a proper idea, or just the laundry list of the French revolutionaries who wanted equality, liberty and fraternity? I think it was just a wish list, and you can't really make a decent political ideology out of that. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, as they say. So that's a problem of liberalism. It wasn't much of an idea to begin with, and it's finally failed. After around 250 years, it's finally failed. So let the penny drop and replace it with something better. And so back to the title of the stream, which is patriarchal moral values. Well, you won't get them unless you subscribe to a moral system that supports patriarchal moral values. And social conservatism is forbidding extramarital sex and punishing it, and the Quran ticks all the boxes. Now, Domingo, the Trojan Horse of Islam entered the American Republic a long time ago. It entered America when Jefferson bought his copy of the Quran from that university bookshop of his, and when he read it and wrote in its margins and drafted the Virginia Statute on religious freedom, and then which subsequently became the First Amendment. It's not me, Domingo. The Trojan Horse entered the American Republic through Jefferson. So, framing the future of the West using this narrative would be far more effective than, I don't know. I don't even know any alternatives. I mean, does anybody know of a better alternative narrative about how the West regains its senses? I'd say that the past 3 revolutions in the West have been about moving away from Christianity and monarchy. The American, French and Russian revolutions have been rejections of Christianity and monarchy. But the penny still hasn't dropped. How many centuries are people going to stay stupid? I mean, that's obviously the reason. And then you get all these Muslims coming to your country because what? Why do they come to your countries? Because, well, you invited them in to do the work that you didn't want to do. And now you're complaining. Well, if you wanted to do your own work, then you should bring up your children better, or have more of them, or, make sure that the schools that you sent them to actually educated them to do something useful when they leave school. But you don't do that, and you don't care. And it's something to do with democracy, the way it operates, the fact that there's a 2-party system and it's divided between the middle class and the working class. Is there anything inherently virtuous about being born in either class? I would say not. So why not have a one-party state governed by the principles of secular Quranism? It's a no-brainer, isn't it? Cultural divide. I don't know what you mean by a cultural divide. I mean, culture is fluid, The same country can have, different cultures over the ages, from one generation to the next, with no immigration, because people will just have an appetite for the novel, new clothes, new music, new art, new. So the culture, I think, we can leave alone, because the culture can only be right if the laws are right. Because culture is basically, it's fluid. So think of culture like water, and just fitting into, whatever the shape of the bottle, the jug, the jar that you choose to hold your liquid in. Culture is fluid. And what you need to hold your liquid in are the boundaries set by the law. The law should be based on a moral system, and in my view, there is only one rational and moral system to choose from. And you should be pleased, because it makes the choice so much easier. Patrick Super asks, a no-brainer, do not let women vote. be a bit more subtle than that. I would allow women to vote, provided they are taxpayers, and most of them won't be once you repeal all the affirmative action anti-discrimination legislation. And they should be repealed on Islamic grounds. Of Chapter 2, verse 256, First Amendment, there is no compulsion in belief, truth stands clear from error, because these anti-discrimination legislation is thought crime, really. So away with it. And once we do that, things will sort themselves out. And when they do, not many women will be paying taxes. But those who do get to vote. So I think that would be fair. And there will be no welfare state, because then there is an Islamic rate of tax, 20% under courts. So this means that the welfare state won't ever be allowed to burgeon out of control. So the government gets, it's 20% flat rate income tax, and it'll expect more or less the same time next year, in the tax years ahead, so they can build their roads and hospitals and whatever they need to do using that tax take, and maybe ask for donations if there's some special project they want to do, and obviously offer to name bridges or whatever after the wealthy donors, something like that. So everything in the Quran, as far as I can tell, makes perfect sense, and it's only not yours perhaps, but the Islamophobia of so many people who refuse to consider it, and obviously the closed-mindedness of these Muslims who won't talk about it because they think they can do better than me. They would hate for me to succeed where they have failed. They doing their dawah individual by individual. Well, I'm doing it nation by nation. And I'm selling it to the Israelis. And really, if the Israelis want to be in good standing with God, they know they have to be a theocracy too. So I'm not necessarily pessimistic, because it's a kind of easy to understand idea that, it's all fully grown, fully clothed and fully armed. It's ready to go. It just needs a go ahead by, somebody in mainstream media prepared to let me say my thing. And in the meantime, somebody with a big channel can give me the opportunity to say my thing to a wider audience. They don't have to agree with me, they just have to platform me and question me. I'd be happy to answer questions if they dare. And why won't they? Why won't these puny nationalists with their clever ideas, why would they engage with me? I mean, if secular Quranism is such a stupid idea, then they can shoot it down in flames. And I just don't actually know it is. I do search it, search for videos on secular Quranism on YouTube, and there's actually nothing. I mean, apart from the ones that I've been in. So obviously it's a conspiracy by these nationalists to, smother it in the cradle. But I think as things get more desperate, people might think, well, it's the only game in town. And okay, what will happen if YouTube say secular Quranism and your channel gets a strike? I would regard it as a sign of success, actually. So I don't mind either way, and then I'll regroup and think of something else. So here's me looking forward to the day when saying secular Quranism gets you a strike from YouTube. What sounds like a fluffy way to convert everyone to Islam. I don't need everyone to convert to Islam. I can't emphasize that enough. And that's why, I get annoyed with these Muslims who say, well, you might as well convert. Say, no, I'm not stupid. I mean, I do say that Islam is an imperial religion. So it means that it has, logically and necessarily, it has to allow freedom of belief. Or you'll be just fighting your subject peoples all the time, forcing them to your religion and creating problems for yourself. Because eventually, if you give them time, they'll think, that the religion of the people who conquered us, it must obviously be better than our own, right? Or they wouldn't have conquered us. And anyway, if we adopted that religion, then we would find, our wheels oiled and everything will be made easier for us. So we might as well convert to, whatever religion it is, and they'll do it, but just give them time. If you force them, they'll just, dig their heels in. So, no, there is no need to make everyone convert to Islam. And secular Quranism is actually, it was created for non-Muslims. Yes, of course, the option exists for you to convert to Islam, but, freedom of belief is guaranteed, and I make that point so often that, if anybody is going to ask me, what's your kind of Sharia so different? How is your form of Sharia different to their kind of Sharia? And I'm going to say it's chapter 2, verse 256. And if you adopt secular Quranism, you're going to get the First Amendment as part of its package, as well as a 20% flat rate income tax and the option of defaulting on your usurious loans. So I think it has pretty powerful incentives, restoring the patriarchy, creating more marriageable men and women for these groups to marry, regenerating the degenerate, and I think it can do a lot of things. Obviously, it would help if the Muslims would discuss it, but it's okay if they don't, If they keep hating on it, that's fine too, because it gives me the clear blue water from their kind of Islam that hasn't served them well at all. Because they've ended up being second-class citizens in somebody else's country. So why should we follow their kind of Islam? So I'm very pleased that I have resisted all their calls to believe in God and convert to Islam, and no, I will be distinctive in my agnosticism and my insistence on my particular rules of interpretation that will distinguish secular Quranism from any other kind of Sharia. Anyway, I think that's all I want to say. This will probably be my last stream. I know I've been going on a bit today, but someone inspired me, or irritated me enough to go on like this. So thanks for listening.